And with that, we'll get going. We're going to have Harry Chase, the Director of Advanced Materials at GE Appliances, speak about the journey they've made around with autonomous mobile robots. And they're using robots, I guess they're using multiple brands of robots, but one set of robots they're using is from Agilox. And Andreas Boedenauer will be speaking about Agilox. We've got Rick Riss, and if you can count, you'll see that there's actually 4 people up here. We had trouble getting Steve Luxion's biography in here. But Lux, you're an expert on drones. Will you just say a little bit about the expertise, perhaps?
Okay. Briefly, I flew fighters primarily in my military career, and late in my career, around 9/11, I picked up flying UAVs, stood up the first armed UAV squadron, and now I serve as the executive director of Assure, the FAA Center of Excellence for UAS, doing all the research on UAVs and how to safely get in national airspace.
Thank you very much. Okay. And with that, let's get going. Let's talk a little bit about the companies up here. We'll start with GE, and Harry, take it away. Tell us a little bit about GE.
Okay. So GE Appliances is no longer part of the big mothership GE. We were divested or sold off about 3.5 years ago to a Chinese company, Haier. Haier is the largest appliance manufacturer in the world. So we have a lot of backing now coming in from Haier to go and kind of move forward and take the process kind of innovation forward. My main responsibility is really up on the map. You can see we have 8 manufacturing facilities. One is semi-down now. We're taking it down. We made top mount refrigerators. We're converting that to a hot water plant. And then some of the service parts, we have 4 warehouses for service parts that we help assist in some of the automation journey and path. On the distribution side, we have 8 warehouses. We're about to increase that up to a couple more. We're adding some space out in California. But again, my main focus is how do I support the inbound logistics, and then how do we move things by autonomous robots as best as we can inside of facilities from the dock all the way to assembly line. And that's our main focus to support GE Appliances.
Beautiful. Wait a sec. Back. Okay. Agilox. Andreas.
Agilox was founded in 2009 by 6 engineers, which actually had already a history, deep history in material handling. And so they decided to start a company doing services in material processing and process improvements. And during this task, they actually figured out they need at some point in time always some additional hardware as a missing link, because in order to improve the processes. And one of this particular product is, of course, they came up with Agilox, the forklift. It's we call AMR. Internally, we call it Intelligent Guided Vehicle instead of an AGV. And it's actually meant for small aisles and easy to turn in very small environment. The company itself, in 2015, it was the idea of Agilox was born, and the first Agilox was field tested 2016, and the first one sold in 2017. In the meantime, every year doubled the revenue, and it's growing quite well. And even though we look like we are the new kids on the block, we are the new kids on the block in the US, but this company is around for a long time with a very deep history in material handling.
And the big thing about autonomous mobile robots is they're not following little things in the floor. It's truly intelligent navigation through a warehouse or a factory.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay. And perhaps, Rick, you tell us a little bit about yourself and the drone research you do.
So I'm Rick Riss. I'm an analyst for ARC for the last 4 years. I kind of come with a strong background in industrial automation. So I have worked in refining chemicals, power, electric grid related functions. So I've done a lot of work also in software development. One of the items that I do cover for ARC is the drone research. We have made one drone study on the drone use in the construction industry, but we've written a number of other articles and try to stay on top of what's going on in various aspects of the drone automation industry. And in fact, Lux and I will be on a session tomorrow morning titled "The Drones for Inspection and Delivery."
Okay, beautiful. Yeah, so Harry, tell us, I guess your job is to figure out how to do material handling better. And so that's probably the context around how you started there, right? So just tell us a little bit about your AMR journey.
Okay. So really, I joined the company just over almost 2 years now with really the purpose of how do we provide more automation for material handling. So my team's kind of different. I do inbound logistics, but I also do material excellence. So how do we set up different systems? But I have an engineering team that really looks at how we can automate that material flow, again, from the dock to the line side. So we started out where we were really pushing to get some type of automation into all of our 8 manufacturing facilities. In doing that, we've tested out different providers. So Agilox is one of our main providers. We've played with a lot of the other companies out there. So we've gone out and we've deployed different, initially a lot of it's cherry picking. So we can go out there and find a work in process movement, or we can find something that's moving. Some of our first implementations were another company, Seagrid. And basically, we were just moving some large parts from the back in the warehouse up to the assembly line. And so we kind of were going through a learning phase to see what we could and couldn't do with mobile robots. We really focused on the mobile robot aspect. Prior history, a lot of manufacturing companies have experience with kind of the old school AGV. You're following wire in the ground. Or you're going out and you're putting magnets in the floor, laser guidance. And we really wanted the flexibility of our manufacturing sites to be able to repath, remap, really at a very quick notice so that we didn't have to go out there and cut floors or do a lot of infrastructure change. So that's kind of the reason we selected to go down the mobile robot path. As we go in there, we play around with the Seagrids really aren't full autonomy. They can't dodge anything. They can't work paths around. So they're very fixed paths, but they're more intelligent than a standard AGV. We can drive them around, set a path up very quickly, and then let them run. So as we went through our journey, again, we've really reached out to most of the AMR providers in North America and the world with Agilox, because we kind of discovered them at a Hanover Messe show. And looking into European methodologies of what they were doing, and got very interested in where they could take us. So as we build out, we're getting to the full autonomy. What really interests us in the Agilox product is it has a true swarming technology, whereas most of our other systems have to go up and down to the cloud. The Agilox can go up to the cloud, but it also can talk robot to robot. So when we get in tight manufacturing situations, it's very easy for us to go and one robot can say, hey, I'm in this one-way aisle, don't come in here. And it makes it a lot easier with the swarming technology. So we look at different providers depending, again, on what they can do. The Agilox, I always call it a robotic, more of a pallet jack. They're coming, hopefully in the future here, they'll come out with some new product. So we get limited on moving carts and moving stands back and forth. But one of the problems we are really running into at GE is just some of the infrastructure. So I always say there's 4 different eyes when you go into mobile robot implementation. Part of it is infrastructure. Do you have the right Wi-Fi networks? Can your floor support you? It's simple things like that. It's whether the hard surfaces or the kind of the surrounding areas. So We really look at that. We test out a lot before we actually deploy one of the robots. We run into a problem where we have integration, so it's hard to go fast enough. So we can't really go into one plan and say, hey, tomorrow you're going to, redeploy all of the team members off forklifts and tuggers, and we're going to go 100% automation. It's just very difficult for us to go that quick. So we have some integration issues, which is why we like the full autonomy, because when they see a forklift or a tugger, they'll stop and try to work around it. So we have issues that we're trying to work around to get the current forklift drivers, tugger drivers to understand what they're working around. We have some software integration. Again, that's really our issue. Traditionally, we've run a lot of things very manually in our manufacturing sites. And so we're trying to develop right now in coordination, which is kind of the picture you see on the right. That's what we call Robocon. Basically, we didn't have a good material replenishment system to go out and kind of find how much inventory we have, send a signal. Because again, if you don't have an automatic signal, then you can't go out and send something automatically while it's somebody pushing buttons. So we've done a couple intermediate steps so we can get some more material replenishment systems up. We use a smartwatch to send the units around. The smartwatches also detect, especially on the not full autonomy units, they'll send a message saying, hey, I've been stopped for 3 minutes. Come rescue me, get this box out of the way, or a person standing out of the way. And so we use a smartwatch to do some control. So as we build out with the software integration, we're really focused on that the first half of the year to see what we can do, different replenishment signals. And then the last one, which is where we really like Agilox, is that as we went through our strategy, it's really the hardware integration side. So what do I unload onto? How do I load it? How do I unload it? So how do I get that hard physical presence to load and unload software or unload the different pallet sizes? So what we've done is we've kind of decided that these are ideal at picking or putting something on it, delivering transportation. And then Agilox helps us do that final. It's not really a final mile for us, it's the final yard. But it's really good at now it can take a cart and put it right to line side for us. A lot of the other robotic companies don't have that capability. So we have to do some interchange stations, roller conveyor, different methodology there. So we're really looking at how do we get all this integration. So we're focused on the transportation side and the delivery, the kind of putting things on top of them or letting it pick something. Because Agilox does have to pick from ground level till we can, I think we're still 3 years off before we can get something that can really pick well off of a 30-foot high bay and deliver it down the floor. There's stuff out there, ASRSs and stuff. As we go in the future, we're really trying to build out this, we're trying to build some of our own technology out. Some of it's hard technology, so how do we automatically unload small totes from from a mobile robot over to a flow rack? How do we enhance the wearables, the material replenishment systems? We've started down the path of drones. We actually bought a couple drones. We thought we'd be really smart and program ourselves for internal use, and unfortunately, we haven't been able to figure out how to program internally because we don't have GPS signals inside the plants. So we're really pushing to see where we can go with a different technology. So over the last year and a half, we've implemented 17 different units. We've got 5 Agiluxes running. And then our goal this year is to exponentially grow that up to 50 to 60 units. Because we've kind of, again, we've kind of cherry picked the easier ones, but now we have a lot of confidence to go forward. How do we expand that out forward?
So Harry, I've got a few follow-up questions. And by the way, this is panel. So at any point, if you have a question, for example, with what Harry's doing and with autonomous mobile robots, please feel free and ask. My first, maybe statement and then question is autonomous mobile robots have really been hot in e-commerce warehouses. But when you talk to people that have implemented them in e-commerce, they're not doing it for ROI. They're doing it because they can't get the warehouse workers. So was your initial impetus more a labor issue, or is it really an ROI kind
Yeah,
of?
so we really have three different things that we started out with.
Yeah.
One is safety. Again, forklifts, unfortunately, have a very limited visibility. So, they have maybe 110-degree visibility at best. And really with autonomy, we could start looking at 360-degree visibility of a team member or worker nearby. So one of our biggest one was safety. We also look at manpower shortages. We do have issues there. We're experiencing, some of our sites are at 40% turnover. We just can't seem to attract people. It's everybody's out there, offering 25 cents more an hour, and people will leave you for 25 cents. Or they come in and they work in a manufacturing environment, they find out it's not as nice. They'd rather go work at a 7-Eleven or something, and they find that a little bit easier. And then again, ROI. So we typically look for a less than 2-year ROI on the investment, because we are putting a lot of capital into the process. So we do look for the ROI, really just to make it a check and balance, so we don't go a little bit crazy and put a mobile robot over in one area that's not really paying back.
Right.
So how do we get that return?
And the ROI is straight, if we had a person doing it, would cost this much money.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, we try to throw some other things in there. We'll look at the bigger picture. There's forklifts are very good at damaging facilities. So a forklift driver can do anywhere, not one single one, but when we look at facility damage, a lot of it's by forklifts. So we're looking at, anywhere in most of our facilities, we're paying $200,000 to $400,000 a year just to repair the facilities where a forklift is backed into a guardrail or backed into a wall. So we do look at adding that in as part of the ROI to help kind of look at the total picture.
And you're replacing forklifts, and you mentioned safety as an impetus. Do you have drivers that are just ramming through the warehouse too fast, or?
I like to say we don't, but I think when you go in any, most of the time our speed limits are 8 miles per hour out in the warehouse, and then the assembly area, they're supposed to go down to 6 to 4 miles per hour. But most of the time, there's always an excuse to go fast. Hey, I'm going to break. No, they don't do that but they're delivering parts to the line, so they think, hey, I got to keep the assembly line up and running, so I need to rush over there. A lot of our plans to try to eliminate, our goal is in a couple of years to have 0 forklifts past the warehouse. We still know that we have to unload trailers by forklifts, and then in the warehouse again, putting it in and out of racking, or a lot of our stuff, we have a cycle time at 10 seconds, so we're building product pretty quick. And so a lot of the stuff we're just stacking on top of each other, which makes it even harder for automation to kind of deal with that.
Right. One of the things I wanted to explore a little bit, probably with both Andreas and you, is the issue of sort of the scalability of this, right? So if I was to say, okay, I want to automate my warehouse, I want to put a warehouse management system in, that's a 9-month project. It's $1 million investment. But with these autonomous mobile robots, you can start small, right?
Correct.
And learn. I heard there was one e-commerce player that was using an autonomous mobile robot that was capable of sort of going into the warehouse, using suction cups to suck onto a package and pull it, it had to weigh a little bit and pull it back to a pack station, right? And the person that gave that presentation said they had an instantaneous payback. And I said, come on, there's no such thing as an instantaneous payback. And he said, we have robotics as a service pricing, which means every time we go out and we pick something and come back, that's a transaction, and we pay for that transaction. And if that transaction is cheaper than a human, then the ROI is instantaneous. So what sort of pricing are we talking about here?
Andreas says he wants to do everything for free for me.
When you talk about this, typical pricing, the basic unit goes for, around 125. We don't have a lot of options. We do have, but it's not necessary essentially. But this is it. It's a plug-and-play unit that is what you get in the crate, you open it up, and essentially, if the customer knows, where the pick up and drop off, which kind of process he wants to take over by Agilox, it's done in minutes. So a commissioning is truly done in minutes. It's a true plug-and-play. And also when it comes to scalability, that's the beauty. So once you open up one unit and it knows the environment and scans it, due to this swarm intelligence, it's shared with all the other ones. So as soon as you get a second unit blank, so it doesn't know anything, you hook it up on the on an IP address. This information is shared with the first one. So as soon as the first one is done, all the other ones don't even take a few minutes just to get an IP address, and information is always shared.
Yeah.
So the setup costs are extremely minimal.
That initial setup for the first robot, is that a human pushing it around or driving it around, or how does it map the facility?
So we take the unit with, our HMI is also very, very easy to use. We got either tablet or a smartphone, ideally a tablet. You walk around with the tablet and push train. And essentially the unit scans with a laser the environment, and it is after a few minutes good to go.
Okay.
Depending, of course, how big the environment is. Of course, if this is a huge facility, it takes a little bit longer if you want to cover the whole facility. But usually you get in, scan a section where the first one is operating, and then if you get a second one, it's automatically scanned the second area. So, and so in that case, that's a very simple process. You don't need to have a drawing or something to upload in the unit in order for the unit to recognize the environment.
Right.
It's all done live by laser.
Okay.
Can I ask the panelists to make sure they speak into the microphones, please, for video recording? And then a couple photos are on the table, and we're picking up when there's text and ringing. If you could remove us from the table, I appreciate it. Thank you.
We have a question? Yeah.
Mike?
Eddie's going to bring you a microphone.
So one of the things I'm always curious about is it people pushing technology or technology pushing people? I'd be curious because we do have a vendor, we have subject matter experts, and we have a client of these products. I'm curious what requirements in terms of safety, reliability, ROI, those kinds of things. What are you guys pushing over to a vendor? What is the vendor kind of imposing on their own technology? And what is maybe requirements outside of both of those that we should be pushing onto AMRs and drones inside of these kinds of environments?
Yeah, so in America right now, from the safety aspect, we really rely on the vendor to provide all that knowledge. So there are some ANSI standards out there. They're not written exactly for mobile robots. So there is a big group, the RIA, the Robotic Association is really working on those new standards. So we really rely on the vendor to come to us and tell us where they can do it. When we get into some of the other aspects, such as ROI, I don't want to discredit the vendors, but we kind of look at the technology, and we're really driving the right applications for it to see where we can. They've designed it for certain applications, and then we're seeing, can we utilize that for that application, or is there even a possibility to expand outside of that application? So I think we work very well hand in hand. Everybody, Agilox is very good. They'll send engineers out there. We'll go over the case we're trying to solve to work with us. And then they price it, of course. There is, as you mentioned, there is a lot of robots as a service. That's kind of the big buzzword right now. We prefer to control our own destiny a little bit. We like to buy it in capital and do a true ROI. When we lease things, there's always pros and cons to leasing. You're paying a higher cost of capital. Our cost of capital is pretty low. And this is an Agilox, but for instance, there could be somebody, we can buy one for $80,000. But when we look at the total lease payments, it ends up being, literally like $50,000 a year. We can get a quicker, instantaneous ROI, but we know over the life of the program, it's better off just purchasing the units and managing it. Most people offer some sort of value-added proposition, I'll call it, for maintenance where they can monitor them, or we pay a yearly maintenance fee or get a certain type of warranty. And a lot of times with that, when they update the software, or we're getting free software updates, or sometimes they'll even change hardware out. So.
We had another question? Yeah.
Two questions. First, I know they're autonomous, but do they still need to maintain connectivity with anything while they're moving? And if so, do you have issues with that? Is it Wi-Fi or within the plants? I mean, there can be a lot of problems with networking in plants and things, in warehouses.
We're G's, we're old G's, so we have perfect one. No, we have Wi-Fi connectivities once in a while. To be honest, Agilox gets where the autonomous mobile robots are very smart, so they can run on their own. The only time we have it is when we have to send a new command of what to do. If it doesn't already have a script to say go from A to B, then it's got to get that Wi-Fi connectivity. Also, we like to, we can look at monitoring to see where they're moving around everywhere. And so it's nice to have that connectivity. So we do go through and do kind of a mapping to make sure we're gonna hit.
And I would think to really you're feeding production lines, so
Correct.
I mean, you really want to be very real time, ideally, right? So I would think you would need to be able to talk to the one, this one is coming and it's got to be the next one. I don't know how you deal with that. Is that?
Yeah, actually the Agilox has swarming technology, so they actually talk to each other all the time.
Oh, so like the elevators? I mean, you hit a button, somebody says, hey, I need replenished,
Yep.
and it'll decide on its own, that kind of a thing?
Yeah, the swarm, they're the leaders as far as, I don't know China or Korea, but as far as I know in the world, they're kind of leaders in the swarming technology method, kind of how do they talk to each other. Basically, and Andreas can explain it better, they have servers on site that are talking all the time, and it's each robot, yeah.
And then my other question was just, what kind of things are they moving? How heavy are they? I mean, you make appliances, you said. Appliances
Yes.
can be all kinds of things.
Yeah, so we move anything from, some things are very light, like EPS that's going in as blocks for a refrigerator. Copper tubing starts getting into the 500 kilogram loads. But right now, we haven't really hit the 1,500 kilogram load limits that we look at. We don't have very many really, really heavy parts. We have like glass or compressors or motors that start getting us into the, kind of into that 800 kilogram, 1,000 kilogram range. But we're moving some heavy stuff and some lighter stuff. Some of the Agiluxes that are moving around right now, they're moving we're moving vegetable pans around with them. So they're pretty light. But they're picking up a 400-pound, 200-kilogram cart with it also.
So I have another question. You're feeding the production line, right? And this is a system designed to be safe. But when you want to feed a production line, you've got a takt time. I wonder sometimes if they're too safe, if they hit an obstacle, do they go around it, or sometimes do they just wait for people and wait for people and wait for people and just get stuck?
Again, that's the beauty of autonomy, is that they're smart, so they think like us. So if they come up on a path and there's something there, they'll try to repath themselves to get there. Mm-hmm. So they'll look at it, and when we map facilities, say we're delivering to the middle, but there's aisles off to the left and the right, and they can come around, they'll actually get there, and then they'll actually teach themselves to say, hey, I keep going down this middle aisle, and it's always blocked for some reason. And then they're smart enough to actually sit there and say, why go down the middle aisle? I found out this is shorter. Before, with a different provider that we worked with, where we ran into problems is that they're a little bit too smart. And so we had wire fencing, and it could see underneath it, and so it kept wanting to go underneath there. But then you can go and block zones out and say, don't go here. So the software systems are great because we can do we can add speed zones, we can add red areas that say, don't try to go this way. So if we don't want it to repath down C for some reason, we can tell it not to go that way. But they're they're almost scary. They're highly intelligent. So they're always talking to each other. They're always remapping. They're always, if they come up on something, they're doing things to kind of work around that. They'll wait for a few seconds. Again, the only ones that we really don't have that capability with is the secrets, because they're pulling tugger trains, and we don't want it to pull 6 carts to turn around. And so there, when something does come its way, they won't repath, they won't do anything. We just have to, that's why we use a watch to buzz somebody and say, hey, I'm stuck here, or what do you want me to do? So after a couple minutes, to make sure we don't impact the assembly lines.
Yeah, okay. Other questions about, right up front here.
Hi, my name is Amy Peters. I'm with Rockwell Automation. I just wanted to ask a quick question about how much do you have to customize to every application? So, and who does that? Is it the end user, or is it a system integrator, or is it the vendor?
That's a very good question, because we were just talking about that earlier. So right now, there's not many system integrators out there that, and this is what we're trying to work with Agilox on, is to find a system integrator that can help us. The base unit, if we need any modifications for it, Agilox will do that. They're very good at it. It's really some of the delivery attachments that we run into issues. In addition, we want to have PLC capability. So if something's empty, or we need a replenishment signal, then how do we do API calls back and forth to the units? So we do look for integrators, but really we're trying to work very closely with Agilox, and then we work with a couple other different providers to try to pull it all together for us.
So I'll just make a quick comment here. We work with a company called High Jump Systems that is trying to spin up a practice in this area.
Oh, really? Okay. Yeah, so we use, I should say, one of our 3PLs uses High Jump in their warehouse.
Yeah.
So they use an older version of Excelos.
So along with that question is, what if you wanted to specify your own robot arm, or is it a custom robot arm from Agilox?
They're really providing the mobile robot. If we add arms onto it, this one you see up there is a Canova. It really can't do any damage. So it's a very simple. The reason we use that one is it already has some built-in cameras for us, so we don't pick anything with it. Our fixed robotic guys look at all the different arms that we can use to look how we incorporate. So we've got a whole other team looking at putting whether collaborative or a fixed robot on top of them to go and pick things and really bin pick and do some kind of really creative things we're working on right now.
Okay, so one more question along those lines. So it sounds like you decreased, with a decreased workforce, which is helps with your ROI. Did you increase your workforce on the robotic side?
Yes, so we hired a couple engineers to help out kind of generally, but to be honest, these systems are really, when Andreas said you can unpack it out of a box and kind of get it up and running, so at every plant we're kind of training, we call them, they're kind of like, they're production team members that have worked their way up. And so they help do special projects for us. We call them moonshiners. So they go out there and they can build things and put together. So we've converted some moonshiners over to like a robotic tender or marshaller. And we really train them. So we've got a couple of our plants. We ship one of these in there. We can't hold them back till my engineer gets there. They're already in there playing with it, setting it up and stuff. So this new technology and the new software is just fantastic for that.
Great, thank you.
Yep.
Hey, how does the decision to go forward with a Agilox here, how does that enable you or prevent you from using other mobile applications in different parts of the same facility? How do they talk together? How do they integrate together?
That's a good question too. So right now, the Agilox guys will have to hold their ears. Most of them want it to use their own. So in other words, and this isn't from Agilox, this is from one of their competitors. And I say, hey, I want to have a couple of different styles in there. And right now, nobody has kind of the full range of offerings. So we're looking at, so some of our plants we have Fetch and Agilox in them. So the question always is, how do they come together and what do they do? Because now you've lost the swarming. Oddly enough, this is kind of strange, when they're from the same vendor, they tend to have to talk to each other. If they're from different vendors, they just see the other guy as a forklift or something, or a person. But however, we still want that total control of the system. So we've been talking to different companies. Nobody's really come out with a solution. Again, I think it's, again, one of their competitors, their idea is that, yeah, we want to be the software and we'll control their unit. And most people don't want to give up 100% control of their units too. So there's a couple companies, one in Korea that's trying to develop a kind of total robot control. There's one out of Germany that's trying to do a similar application where they say they can even tap into AGVs to understand and get that kind of one picture of how to control the robots and stuff. I don't see a single control source coming for a few years till there's to be honest, their whole strength and why we like the different applications, or they're good at different applications, is that they've developed different algorithms or technology in the background. And to kind of limit some of them to say, hey, I want you to go this one control system, till there's kind of a shared kind of control system or calling system, it's hard. We've already integrated we've integrated 2 companies with simple API calls, Agilox and another one, that we do I think it's pretty slick, things with it that they can kind of, they're working together, but they're not all in that one control system yet. But again, I think we're a couple years away from that.
So I just want to add something there. It's sort of, I spent a year doing research on autonomous mobile robots and talked to all the vendors. And for e-commerce warehouses, or spare parts are very similar to e-commerce warehouses, they're each picking. Some of the AMR vendors will tell you that their secret sauce is not the hardware, it's the software. It's the specific patented process they use of how robots work with people to drive productivity in a warehouse. So the idea of getting to one control system, I think maybe makes more sense in manufacturing and feeding a production line, perhaps. But I think there's going to be real problems in supporting each picking with that.
Yeah, there's limit, and when I talk to the different companies, there's limited capital. So again, from our standpoint, I'd love to go to just one supplier and say, hey, you got it all, just bring it all together for me. You have we call them flat tops, the little fetches, and you got this, and you got a tugger style. You got something that can run outside. I'd love to go to one. But again, talking to everybody, the industry's really only been out there, I think, strong enough there's been kind of the development phase. It's really only been out in the public for 2-3 years. And so again, with limited resources, they're focused on kind of delivering the best of this. And everybody looks at a big roadmap, but again, we don't push them too hard on that because we really want them coming and perfecting what they have now and not necessarily trying to do 50 things not very well. I'd rather see them do 1 or 2 things really well until they get that mastered, and then go out and get it to the 8 different types of mobile robots we would need.
Okay, let's move on to, is there another question? Okay.
Is it surprising to you that some of the like a large traditional automation company, particularly ones that already have mobile bots, have not kind of tried to roll up something like this? So they say, yeah, we have 10 different types of technologies, and we could do tuggers, we could do forklifts, we could do move totes around and do things like. It surprises me, but I'm not.
Yeah, I don't. Again, I think with any disruptive technology, the old guys tend to not want to change yet, or maybe they're playing it out to see whether it really sustains itself. I think you see more and more where Toyota now is trying to buy into different companies. You got a lot of the guys panicking a little bit, I think, to go out there and say, hey, maybe we need to pick something up or pick one of the companies off. So we're always very nervous about that because we spend a lot of time going on and developing things for 6 months, a year, and we get very nervous. I usually sit with all the CEOs and say, look them in the face and say, are you going to sell off to Amazon? And they all say, no, of course not. So we had one, Canvas Technologies, that we dumped a lot of resources and time into, because they had some outside vision technology that we were very interested in. And they called me up. We were just about to start a massive deployment, and they called me up and said, "Hey, we're going to send you a check. We're buying everything back." And I was like, "Oh!" And so a week later, Amazon announced Amazon bought them out. So we're paranoid about it because we're always afraid that one of the big companies gets into Agilox, and then they say, "Well, that was really cool for you, but now we're going to buy another company and then kind of mix you, and then we get some weird sauce that we don't want."
I actually have a friend in the industry named Bruce Welty. And Bruce went out and formed a warehouse services company, a 3PL company, and the whole business model was based on the Amazon robots. I can't remember what they used.
Kiva Systems.
Yeah, Kiva Systems. And he was going great guns. And then Amazon bought Kiva, at that time doing less than $100 million in business for $675 million. And by the way, when we talk about roll-ups, there are some companies that have 10 million in revenues that have 125 million in venture capital invested in them, and the VC doesn't totally own the company. So the valuations are very high. But he bet his whole business model on Kiva. Amazon came in and said, "Oh no, that's okay. We'll continue to maintain them. We're probably not going to sell them to you." And then after a year, they said, "We're not going to maintain them anymore." So Bruce went off and built his own robot company. Now he's part owner of a robot company and a 3PL. So I love that story. Let's move on to drones. I think robots and drones are technologies that are very closely connected. So let me just introduce it. What I want to get to here is what's real and what's hype. I think it was 6 or 7 years ago on 60 Minutes, Jeff Bezos had this vision of using drones to deliver right to the doorstep. And then there were patents like this blimp in the sky, and drones were going to go up to the blimp and come down. There used to be Saturday Night Live. There was a Dan Aykroyd episode where he's pretending to be Julia Child. He chops a finger off. Blood is spurting everywhere. And he continues to talk and go on with making this recipe. That's sort of what I visualize, a drone delivering right to somebody's doorstep. I struggle with that. So talk to me where drones are real, where they're practical, and what's a little bit further out there.
You wonder me.
Go ahead.
Okay.
Yeah.
Boy, I'm listening to this conversation, just if I can, just before we get started.
Yeah.
And everything that just was discussed with ground robotic vehicles directly maps to the issues we are dealing with air. It's just the complexity of flight, the complexity of the third dimension, or the opportunity of the third dimension for deconfliction, and the level of safety. Because when that robot just stops and sends you the note that, "Hey, what do you want me to do?" and it's falling out of the sky, that's quite a different situation. But yeah, right now, the Jetson analogy comes up all the time. As the latest creative minds and the Amazons and the Bezos, they're conceptual, they're great. They come up with super ideas of how, things can be more efficient. Unfortunately, they have to integrate into the world's safest national airspace system. And the FAA is not going to be bullied around. They ignore Congress every day on what they can and will and must do. So that changes the sense of reality. Amazon believed when they came out, when I first met with them, that they would get to reserve for them and their competitors airspace of about 200 to 400 feet all the way around the globe, until I asked the question, well, how do we take off and land in helicopters from heliports and deal with those kind of situations? And I got we didn't think about that, but we'll just put rings around those areas and move on. But that's how they were thinking. They were very much focused on themselves of how things would go. So until some of the veil of this regulatory risk and safety is validated and proven, and that's where we spend a ton of time And all the things you talked about, I could go through. I got lists here of all the similar issues. The FAA will not move. It's trying to move aggressively, but it's just not getting there. So just recently, last week, I put together, working with the FAA, all these different types of operation, be it a blimp sitting up there where they get stuff and bring it down, or another company I was talking to about a month or two ago, they want to have a glider tow, a towed glider, take it up into space behind it's a Lear jet. Then they have a power glider. It goes up, launches a satellite, and very effective, and then autonomously comes back down to Earth, lands, and to redo satellite launches. All of that has come into play, but the FAA has no certification for these things. Cargo, there's Part 135 certifications for manned aircraft, but that at one end, without any manned on board, is not really well exist. And at the other end, it's called Part 107 that allows you to fly day, under 55 pounds, visual line of sight. There's nothing in between. So until those bins of certification are established, the FAA will continue to throw a wet blanket on any number of these fantastic ideas. Now, it's moving, and I'm happy to talk about the areas in space that things are going on. One of your discussion items was the visibility of being able to see other robots. Well, that's critical in the air because the new entrance is UAVs and drones, and they have to deconflict with all manned aircraft. So they need to know what's behind them, around them, and all those kind of technologies are currently being evaluated, and standards of performance are coming out. Industry standards, same issues. All these problems have to be kind of worked out generally enough to free up and provide a level of safety that the FAA will accept. So reality versus vision, the visions are probably great, but we need more effort in freeing up that regulatory risk to get them there.
Yeah, let me just add to that and kind of look at the big picture in the marketplace. We certainly see that the inspection side of drones is a little bit more advanced than the delivery side. Several of the problems that drones are good at solving, you might think, would be a great fit for drones, turned out not to be such a great fit in part because of this. For example, electric utility industry, EPRI, did a lot of research on what drones might be used for. Companies like Duke Energy that we have some people attending the forum here, researched all the different things they might use drones for. And you could imagine that they could inspect wind turbines, they could inspect transmission and distribution lines. And, it turns out that I was kind of surprised to learn in talking with them that we really can't use drones very effectively for transmission and distribution, And one of the limitations is that, under the Part 107 regulations, you cannot fly beyond visual line of sight. You can't fly at night. Well, if you have a transmission line and you can't fly beyond human eye, unaided view of that drone, you're going to have to carry that drone in some cases across long spans of transmission lines. There's no roads there. They can't do that. So they basically continue to inspect today with helicopters because they really cannot get, in some cases, the permits. Now, FAA has issued permits in a number of cases, right? There's the 333 exemptions, I guess, that, in very rural areas, you do see this. There have been, I think, pizzas delivered by drone. But they tend to be in the rural areas. You see an organization like Zipline in Rwanda that is very well established. Well, they don't have an FAA in Rwanda yet, although I came to understand that Lux may be going to Rwanda to help them make the Rwandan FAA, right? But in fact, there's a big conference in Rwanda this week about drone use. And so you do see a lot of the very rural areas that don't have the problems of all the other airports and conflicting situations. In fact, you see this map that's up here. These circled areas in there, you cannot fly a drone in those areas, all right? And some of the drones actually come with built-in geofencing that prevent them from flying in that area. And I think another important thing that there has been a great deal of advancement, though. I think the UTM, the unmanned transportation traffic management systems, are under development. There is a lot of issues. There's a great hope that the UBS, ABSB rather, right? ABSB regulations, I think, starting in January. Correct me if I'm wrong, Lux, but in January it was required that all aircraft have ADS-B out. That means that every one of those aircrafts, piloted aircrafts, helicopters, and planes, are required to broadcast over ADS-B their location. And it's actually only one way. Drones are now being built that they will pick up that there's an aircraft in my area, so the drones will know that the aircraft. Now, you would think that's the backward way, all right, that really it's the aircraft pilot that wanted to know where the drones were. We hear all these reports of airports being, have drones spotted and things like that. But so far that apparently would overwhelm the traffic management. There are so many drones out there that would be broadcasting that they're not able to send their GPS coordinates. And eventually, the vision, I think, would be that this technology of each drone knowing its own position in three-dimensional space and broadcasting that to each other drone, and each other aircraft pilot, and be part of a much larger unmanned traffic management system. Those things are simply not in place. They are developing quickly. And as I mentioned, they're developing more quickly in other countries that don't have drone regulations. Flying package delivery downtown New York City, with telephone poles and FedEx and Amazon and UPS all on the same street at the same time. You could imagine there's a few conflicts there, but it is coming. And then the second thing, of course, you see that companies like Uber formed UberX. All right, UberX, they're developing, manned delivery, so not just package delivery, but human delivery. All right, they tried to pull this off at the UAE airport, in Dubai. They had to give up on that at first, but there's this great vision that you would be able to land on top of building tops or parking lots in Los Angeles, and for about the same price of a taxi ride, you could go 40 miles on like $40 or something. So there's a great vision there. It's definitely coming, but it's still got quite some way to go, I guess.
Yeah. One place I have heard drones being used, in theory with ROI, is for counting inventory in warehouses.
It's outstanding.
And I struggle with that, and I'll tell you why. With an existing with a drone, it can see whether the slot is open or closed, but it doesn't necessarily know how many things are in the slot. If there's RFID, it knows what's in the slot, but RFID is kind of pricey, And then, if you're using RF guns when you put stuff away, you get 99.9% accuracy anyway. So I struggle with the ROI of this. I don't know if you've come across anything here, or
I would say a lot of this is trial, because the drones are generally so cheap. People are trying to figure out ways and methods to do anything that's dull, dangerous, or dirty. Like that, the inventory inspection inside, first of all, it's very difficult because a lot of GPS restrictions make things harder moving around, although they've overcome a lot of that problem. So a lot of these attempts are just that, experiments, see what they get, what are the costs, what's going on. As mentioned earlier, in the ground vehicles, it's very fragmented sector. And the big guys and I've talked to them, the Boeings, and they've started doing this. They've stayed back because of regulatory restrictions not clear mission sets yet, which will define the truck, the UAV itself. Then you start building sensors and data, and really it's all about the sensors and data and how to do that. Until that risk is lifted, they'll let the market play. They'll let the guys all eat each other up and then whoever's the winner or potential winners, they'll go buy that up. And we've seen Boeing do that recently over the last year, start buying up some companies as they're making their move into this space in specific applications. Those were primarily fixed wing, longer endurance, potentially communication systems, sensors, or precision ag type applications.
Yeah. So I'm hearing limited real-life practical applications for drones right now.
I think for cycle counting, it's
Yeah.
their ideal application. So again, we have two that we've been playing around with ourselves to try to fly inside. We've got a little bit different thought process on how to do it. We're tying it in with mobile robots. But we'll probably end up buying a drone for cycle counting this year. It's the RFID isn't really the advantage. The advantages come with the problem with RFID, we don't even need the drone. We can actually drive it down the ground and pick up everything out there. So it's not a big issue. Where we run into issues so we can't seem to get labels to face the same way. So they can read barcode labels. Yeah. But again, if somebody breaks it apart and they take 3 pieces out, it kind of defeats the purpose of cycle counting. But our thought is we can do it quicker, so we can do a whole aisle, and even if we have somebody flying it and then somebody kind of monitoring it, we can do that quicker than they can cover a lot more than with 2 people in a forklift or going up and down for safety.
Okay.
So the ROI for cycle counting is very quick.
Okay, so that's real. What about, do I have a question? Did I hear something? Yes, Sid, go ahead.
No, it's just, I thought I some things. I understand the things like with the power industry and transmission distribution, the challenges there and the regulations. But what about things like construction sites? You know, when people are building things, it's very hard sometimes. It depends what you're building, but you know, they have lay down areas and you're trying to find things like that. And I've heard people talk about using them. Like, you know, if you're building bridges or in your Bechtel or you're building an airport, these lay down lots are enormous. Now, it's all on a private area. It's a specific use by a specific company, not a business. I wouldn't call it a business, big business opportunity. It's just that company buying and using the robots. I could think during a construction time when you're trying to do inspections and just get a sense of what the status is. And you want to get up high and you don't want to be sending people all over the place and all that. I thought people were using that. So I guess maybe it's for Rick, because I think you follow that kind of stuff quite a bit.
Yeah, and
or anybody else, but anyhow.
I definitely have a comment on that. You know, in the industries that are the largest growth areas or the largest market segments for drone automation are both kind of in the inspection side today, and that would be actually farming. All right. Again, with the case of farming, you're flying a drone over your own property. There's no people under you. You can often execute those within line of sight and do that as part of the Part 107 rules, 400 feet line of sight, or you probably would have a fairly good chance at least applying for an exemption for some of those issues beyond line of sight, et cetera. You know, and farming would use something like it typically uses ultraviolet cameras to be able to monitor the growth, and you can imagine that, you know, some very effective. And I'll get to construction in a second, but farming is the biggest industry, and the tremendous growth and the word of mouth when they come to the marketplace, all the farmers start realizing, hey, this farmer's producing a lot more than me per acre. That gets word of mouth. And the farmers are not particularly expert at drones, and so oftentimes they'll hire these specialized companies just to manage everything. We got the drone, we got the camera, we got the data analysis. We'll do all of that. We'll just tell you when to fertilize, when to water, and what your estimated harvests are going to be. You know, huge financial gain in that area. A similar way, construction. You're not allowed to fly a drone over other people, but unless those other people are kind of under your control. And so I think some of the construction sites have received the possibility of flying within the boundaries of their construction site. And it's very useful to figure out the inventory, how many truckloads of dirt came in, because you can count them, how many, what the inventory of piles of materials on site are, and obviously monitor the project. And so there's definitely a big market in construction.
There's a good ROI. I mean, that's what's going to drive you, ROI.
So in the area particularly of construction, mine areas or where they're digging out dirt, where it's very difficult to, actually not safe to survey, or there are safety concerns in surveying. The UAVs and the sensors and the ability to have that 3D look is very accurate, and the ROI on that is outstanding. Matter of fact, most are doing that as long as they have the airspace to operate. They're moving out there. One that's not really directly business related that I need to bring up is the area of public safety. Congress has dumped on us $6 million to be matched, another $12 million, and then with FEMA, DHS, some of the other agencies you would imagine involved in this have been tasked to look at UAS for disaster prep and recovery. And that includes all arms. Obviously, our focus will be dealing in man-made and natural disasters. What are the right things? How do we turn on and off airspace quickly so these things can be used more appropriately? But out of that, we intend to branch into all first responder type actions where it makes sense to help them with law enforcement. What are the policies for the cameras and privacy versus custody? All of those kind of things are going to be worked out. Really interesting is what UAS can do in fires, but you got to keep the wrong people out. So there's command and control issues that we're working through, and actually may be developing through some of these projects on our own to help first responders do that. So the whole public safety space is ripe. There's a lot of money coming into us to figure it out, and then companies. We're working with AT&T FirstNet. And then FirstNet.gov, which is all the communication systems for first responders, to kind of pull all this off.
Hello, I'm Larissa. I'm from Brazil. And I work with the public sector. And from the public sector perspective, having a tool to keep track on the public constructions is aligned to his question. It is really important. I'm from Rio de Janeiro, and we have a fun story from there. He probably knows. We got this construction of a major highway in the port area, and two big steel beams disappeared. 2 or 20, I don't remember. But it was incredible. How do you ensure that the construction, both to keep track during the construction side and trust only the contractor? So that's more or less a provocation, but also an idea for people who is working with drones. And I know that the government, the previous mayor of Rio de Janeiro, tried to deploy to keep track of the Olympic Games constructions in the city in Rio de Janeiro. Tried to use the drone, but the barrier was the price and also the regulatory part. So he tried, but didn't work out very well. But I can see the value on that. It's easy to install a mobile camera than a fixed camera that people can get by and say, I know that there is a camera there, so I won't show my face over there. So, and to control to ensure that there's no corruption, no stealing from the construction site also, I think, is a value point.
So I've got another question for you, related to drones. A few years ago, I saw startups, blimp companies for cargo. Is that real? Is that a fantasy? What are your thoughts around that?
Do you want to go first? I have a little bit of knowledge in this area, just testing.
Yeah.
I guess I don't really have any response to that. Maybe you have something.
Yeah, alls I know, and again, it's obviously not moving very quickly. one of our test sites, and I'm not read in on, given the non-disclosure agreement, are doing a lot of work, or what was about a year and a half ago, doing a lot of work in different drone activities being blimps, autonomous vehicles, and potentially manned, but I think all of these were more of an autonomous nature. The specific mission area, I don't know, but we had a spike for about a year and a half looking at these and what they could do and not do, pretty much out of the West Coast out in Oregon. But if anybody wants to try to look into it and figure it out, I don't know that the information's out there. It was pretty protected, and it could have even been a kind of a DoD project, but I don't know.
And it could have been a failed experiment.
Yeah, it's true. It could have been.
I do recall that there was some blimp programs after natural disasters to basically put up instant cell towers or
Yeah.
network connectivity. So there's definitely some applications out there for, that's not a heavy lift application, obviously, but that's a stationary location for long duration.
And there are blimps out there that are specially made for that communications relay.
Do we have any more questions for our panelists?
The video we found yourselves in kind of, I guess you could call it like an asset utilization conundrum. Is there ever a problem keeping these robots and drones busy? Downtime is not a good thing.
And I understand the concept of robots as a service, so I guess you're paying for every evolution of an activity. But all in all, either you or the robot provider wants to keep those assets as fully utilized as possible. So kind of, it's an odd question, but it's occurred to me here that it's like any other asset. You want to keep them busy. Has that been a challenge?
For us, not really. So they're pretty well working according to schedule. We probably haven't tasked them 100% yet to really start pushing them. So most of our robots are probably, in the 70-80% utilization phase. So we do, part of it is because a lot of them do auto charging. We're planning in some charging time and different things like that take away some of the utilization. But we haven't run into it yet. Most of them have been very reliable. We haven't really run into many issues. We'll have, I want to say out of our 17 running around, we've probably lost 10 minutes so far out of that year and a half for some sort of, glitches or whatever. So we haven't really noticed that yet. No sick days yet.
I think I want to maybe mention that, kind of the asset that they're worried about is the manpower asset. We want to minimize happy to have a drone pilot and a drone camera operator. You have a lot of labor used, had to go to the site. You want to have more autonomous operations so the drone can operate by itself. The drones are relatively cheap, at least most of the inspection drones. Maybe some of the larger military activities are a different situation, but that you would see companies that started out as a drone service company, that maybe a utility or construction site managed, and then, they could manage everything. They provide the drone, they provide the pilot, and eventually the end user starts to figure that out, and eventually the automation puts himself out of business. He's actually predicting that his drone business, he will no longer be able to pilot these because that autonomy is going to eliminate the need for that human. So the human is a huge cost in drone operation.
And I could come from either end on this one. So let me take a briefing on the civilian side that I took this week. We're doing a bunch of data. We're collecting all the freaking data that we can find around the globe on UAS uses by various states, local, whatever. And we've been very successful. And in a briefing I saw last week, we were laying out to the FAA different kinds of things we can just show you. So I don't have the specific numbers, but the chart, if you can imagine it, was very, very flat for amount of flight hours for a particular drone use. We can identify drones when they're up. And then a couple of companies spike it up where they're the service that is constantly trying to keep their drones engaged. Now, I take that back to my military application. What I found in the military was it became so needed once the capabilities could be defined of how it can be useful, that it became a 24/7, every single 365 days a year, I need that drone. So you're swapping them out, you're flying them all the time. They're on the ground for whatever maintenance period for that specific, but most of the military applications, you have a ground control station and you have up to maybe 4 UAS that are associated with that ground station, 1 aircraft at a time, but that allows that maintenance cycle. So that thing stays fully engaged. And today, the demand cannot be met on the military side. Back to the manpower. Because of that shift in mission to 24/7, and I expect this will occur in the civilian sector also, in commercial application, that you can run these things 24 hours and then just swap out pilot to pilot, next guy in, next guy in. There's a manpower component that's about, it was for one orbit, if I remember correctly, it was about 8 to 10 people to maintain that orbit 24/7, 365 years. To give them a day off, kid sick, all those kind of things. How do you manage that? There is a manpower cost at the end of the thing that far exceeds what we would do with manned aircraft, but that's because the manned aircraft, we don't fly the same way. We fly that differently. So things will shift a little bit. Those ute rates, I really do expect to grow, but because of some of these things we've talked about, the regulatory wet blanket, I can only work here and there. It hasn't had the chance to blossom yet.
I apologize if I've missed any hands. We've got blinding light on us up here. Any more questions? Okay, let's give the panelists a hand.